The More of Us podcast features real, uncut conversations about life, pastoral ministry, and walking with Jesus. All guests are pastors in the Charis Fellowship, bound by our common commitment to biblical truth, relationship, and mission. We trust as you hear more of us, you'll see Christ among us.
Tim, good to be with you again today on our More of Us podcast. How you been, Tim?
Doing well. It's nice to have a live interview today with our guest in the studio with us.
It's been, we've had a lot of phone calls. You're exactly right. It's good to have another person. And we have today with us Phil Bryant. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you. Excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah, good to have you.
All the way from Canada, right?
Hey.
Good to be here with you. And Tim, how's everything in your church going right now, by the way?
Good. Looking forward to a spiritual formation weekend that we're doing, where we are doing a couple talks and some worship on Friday night. And then Saturday morning, we'll be doing some workshops and actually giving training and real-time opportunity to do confession, not Catholic confession, but confessing your sins to God, talk about fasting, Sabbath, silence and solitude, and a couple other elements. I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So when his people were calling him Father Tim, that wasn't...
Well, Archbishop, Father, I think they kind of...
The sign of the cross. Actually, before the Catholic-Protestant divide, the early church did that to remind themselves of the spiritual authority they had. And now if I do it, it looks like I'm maybe going to Notre Dame or something. I don't know.
Well, today we are so honored and blessed to have Phil in the Seminary podcast room with us. Phil has 20 years experience as a church planter missionary in Canada. And then the last 7 years, he transitioned to the Assist Church Expansion. And now I'm sure he'll share with us about this. Now he's heading back to Canada to continue the work there. So, Phil, thanks for being with us today.
It's great. Really looking forward to being with you guys.
Yeah, I want to just start off with something that you've probably run into your entire life, people mixing up you and your twin brother, Nathan. How have you just learned to let that roll, or if you, anyway, go with that.
Well, actually, I'm the extrovert, Nathan's the introvert, which you wouldn't know that necessarily if you hadn't met me with Nathan, but Nathan works hard at being very friendly with people. So usually it's people will meet me, and then they'll see Nathan, and then he'll be like, I don't know who you are. And that's always fun to watch his response because he doesn't know. And I have an incredible story if you have time for a story, but I don't know.
Give us a story.
Okay, so really good friends of ours, I would stay with them. I won't use their names so I don't get too much in trouble here. But really good friends of ours out on the West Coast, I would stay with them when we just moved out here to start the church in Vancouver. I'd go down to the district ministerial meetings, and I'd stay with this couple was a part of this church. And wonderful people, and I'd stay with them for probably like almost a year and a half, like at least 7 times going to ministerial meetings. So we meet up with them at youth conference. Well, we don't meet up with them. Nathan bumps into them at youth conference. This is now at Liberty University years ago. And this gentleman looks at Nathan and is almost offended that Nathan doesn't say hi to him, doesn't recognize him, and starts. And then Nathan's like, "Well, no, my name is Nathan." He's like, he's not convinced. No,
he thought he was messing with you.
Oh, I thought I was messing with him and being rude to him. And just being a goof, right? And he's like, and finally he says, no. And so Nathan pulls out his driver's license and says, this is me. And he said, that's a fake. It's not a real driver's license, right? It's like, Nathan, I don't know how to help you. Like, I'm sorry. And so he puts his in his envelope and walks away. About maybe an hour and a half later, Nathan and I were chatting and walking down the hall, and him and his wife come walking back. And he's looking at us, and he still was mad at me. He was still mad at me for playing a game on him when I'd never played. And so even we still joke about it today. I've actually stayed in their home about 3 months ago. I just stayed in their home, and they're wonderful people. But
do you have to show your license every time?
He still actually has a little resentment. He's like, I can't believe you did that to me. I didn't do anything to you. So it is an interesting thing with being a twin and in ministry together and serving together. And I find it's a great privilege. And all the things that are wrong, I say, well, it must have been Nathan. That would be.
Yeah, there you go.
Like in grade school, did you play any tricks on your teachers or anything?
You know what? We never did. And I have one more story if you want another story. So even though we're verbal jokesters, we're not practical pranksters. If that makes any sense. The verbal humor is very much a part of our lore, but we don't really like deceiving people. It's not part or pranking people. But Nathan, when he moved down to the Waldorf Grace Brethren Church, this is when we first got started in the fellowship way back in 1992 and 93. he was an intern down there, and they had a Christian school, and the Christian school had all these single teachers, and the secretary at the Waldorf church was constantly trying to hook him up with one of these teachers. And he was so sick of it. He's like, I am so done with that. And so my wife and I just got married, and we went down to visit him, and we hadn't been to visit because I was at an IFCA church there and up in the DC area because we were at Washington Bible College at the time. And so we went down to visit him, and so we played this little prank. So Beth walks in, she takes her wedding ring off. She just has her engagement ring on. And she says, well, and she puts her hand up next to her face, exposing the ring, asking the girls, is Nathan around? And silence. We thought we were going to get him right there. No. And Nathan had told me the names of the secretaries, where they sat, and make sure I would understand that. So I walk in about maybe 4 or 5 minutes, maybe a minute and a half later, and I say, hi, Gloria, hi, Donna, great to see you guys this morning. And I dip Beth right there in front of them. Still no response.
Huh.
So Beth and I walk over to go see Nathan in his office, and we're feeling a little disappointed, like we had failed. We didn't accomplish the mission here. We just totally messed it up. Well, the 5 minutes that it took us to go get Nathan and come back and introduce ourselves to the secretaries in real time, they had already contacted all of the teachers in the school, and they all knew that Nathan was engaged. So when we walked back to see the secretaries, they started screaming and hollering and hooting. Oh, my word. They couldn't believe that he was a twin, and I wasn't. We looked at him. So that was the time we did prank someone, and it was actually pretty effective. So, yeah.
Very nice.
Way to go.
Very nice. Phil, one of the things we do on this podcast is we talk to the Charis family leaders and pastors in the fellowship. And so, we'll talk about ministry, we'll talk about Jesus. We also holistically want to talk about just being human. So, on that note, what are some of your favorite things to do when you have a day to yourself? I'm sure that's probably few and far between, that you're not running around flying and ministering, but what's some of your hobbies or something you just like to do to unpack?
Well, I used to really love to play basketball. And then my sedimentary lifestyle and a couple other formal accidents with my ankles and my hips and my tearing my ligament out of my groin, these things had an impact on my ability to play. And so I'd stopped doing that. So actually, I haven't had a lot of great hobbies. I really enjoy being with my family. I enjoy being with my kids. And so I think that's probably my biggest hobby right now. I picked up trying to play guitar, and I stopped, and I was told my wife in this last, maybe I need to figure that one out again. So yeah, I probably am the poor hobby guy. I'm not the greatest hobby guy, but
Tell us a little bit about your family, if you enjoy being with them, ages, kids.
Oh yeah. So I've got 5.
Okay.
And in some ways we have 2 families, because I had 3 girls 18 months apart right away when we first started having kids. When we moved to Toronto to start the churches. Literally, they all kind of came right one after the other. And then I got fixed, and we were all supposed to stop the process because 3 under 3 in diapers was driving all of us a little bit insane. Our capacities were quite limited. Even though we had 4 hands, there were still 3 kids, and that wasn't enough. So, and so when we moved to Vancouver, which was now 6-7 years later after the youngest was done, and I had got fixed. Well, the girls, my daughter Lydia, the oldest, started praying for an older brother. And she had a little prayer meeting with 2 other sisters. Literally around our coffee table, they had a little prayer meeting praying for a little brother. And so my wife goes to Philadelphia for her grandmother's funeral, and she calls me and says, we're expecting. And I said, well, can you take another test? Because we'd got rid of all of our stuff. I don't have any, I'm just not thinking we're going to have more kids. And sure enough, she said, I've taken 2 already. So no, I think we're going to have one. And so, what's interesting is when we moved to Toronto, Beth was this far pregnant when we started the first church, which at the time was called Grace Community Church. Now it's called Renew. And then when we moved to Vancouver, Beth now is pregnant with Elijah, and she has birth like 2 weeks after we start the church in Vancouver. And so I don't know if I want to move and start another church again.
Yeah, there's a trend here. Nice. So just to clarify, you were fixed, and you've had 2 miracle children.
Right, exactly. So Elijah was born. We call him Elijah because it was totally a miraculous birth. And then we begged God for another one so he wouldn't be by himself, because he's 7 years younger than his youngest sister. So we got 2. So we have 5. So the 3 girls are great. My oldest daughter is married, and she has 3 kids. living in Northern California, going to the Ripon Grace Brethren Church, and loves being a part of that. And then my middle daughter is here, and she's looking to be a missionary. She wants to be a missionary. She just got accepted at the seminary, which we're super excited about. So she's in that 5-year program, and hopefully she has 2 years left to finish her MDiv. She loves languages, so you probably and her can have an intelligent conversation, whereas I can't have an intelligent conversation. But
Well, I think she was in my public speaking class, if it was Anna.
probably, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Tall, blonde. Yep. Little bit sarcastic and fun. Yeah, that's her. So my other daughter, Alyssa, my youngest, she lives with us, but she's finishing her counseling degree at a very, very secular place at Simon Fraser University. It's interesting to watch her faith really be challenged in that way. And so she's looking to see what God will do in using her in that space. And then my 2 boys, Elijah and Josiah, they live at home with us. Of course, they're 16 and 16 and soon to be 15. And Josiah will be 15 in just a couple weeks. So, yeah, and Elijah's trying to figure out how to run a Christian Bible study in a very secular high school. So we're having fun. It's been good. We have a great time with them.
Good. Phil, in the landscape of ministry and the pressures of being busy, how do you keep your marriage healthy?
Well, one of the things that we did very early on was make sure we always had a date night. And it didn't have to be expensive or anything crazy. In fact, sometimes it's going shopping at Costco. Sometimes that's the joke. Oh, look, you guys going to a date night? Yeah, we're going to Costco.
It was Walmart for us, but yeah.
Wherever, just doing errands.
Those are some of the best dates, though.
They
really
can be.
are.
Yeah, they are. And doing errands together and just, the other thing is Beth and I, we dated a lot by driving places and talking and kind of going on adventure. We've never been here before. Let's just check this place out. And so we kind of still do that, and that's kind of fun for us. And so I think making time for each other, I think, is really, really important. And dating each other. I think one of the things that was probably one of the best things that we did was just our marriage seemed really amazing until we had kids. I don't know if you guys had that experience or not. And then realized just how much of a temper I actually had. I didn't realize I thought that was gone since I was 13, but I guess it reawoken when screaming children came into play, and in the interplays of everything. And my wife used to be my secretary, and so I say that I lost my wife and my secretary in one fell swoop when Lydia came into being, and so it was interesting. In the next 3 or 4 years, we developed some bad habits of how to interact with each other that weren't as healthy, and we kind of discovered that. And woke up and said, why did we never treated each other like this before? And it's because of the duress and the tension and just normal reality. And so we just re-centered ourselves to say, we're not going to speak poorly to each other. We're not going to, it doesn't mean that we don't have dispute, but we're just not going to use words that aren't helpful. And so we worked really hard at that. And that's been really a godsend to our marriage, because we don't deride each other or use extreme language with each other or yell or raise our voices and that kind of stuff. That's just not that we're perfect, but that's just a discipline that we've worked at, and that's really protected our marriage too. So I would say date nights, and then learning how to make sure that we honor each other and how we speak to each other has been the 2 probably biggest things to keep our marriage healthy.
Good. Yeah, I remember when my kids were really little, and you're lacking sleep,
Right.
You're lacking patience. You're like, oh, I've become a grumpy person.
Yes.
Now my kids are older, but I have a dog, and so that's what draws it: the dog and the cat and the ferret. They're
But those are self-imposed, Tim.
I totally
Just-
I know that.
Tim, that sounds like a
So-
book.
I'm mad at myself too. Yeah, the dog, the cat, and the ferret.
Yeah, that's a book.
That is a
Yeah.
book. Yeah.
A father's bad choices. Yeah, there it is.
How to torture yourself.
Yeah,
I'm gonna bring another
exactly.
pet in the house. Yeah.
Tell us, Phil, about some of the key influences in your life at this point in your ministry. Are there podcasts? Are there authors? Are there pastors that you like to listen to? Who you find great encouragement in?
Yeah. I mean, boy, I kind of been shifting gears a little bit because of my role has been shifted. And before, even though I did quite a bit of leadership stuff, like starting a church and being a church planter per se, but I was always under a mission and under responsibilities under someone else, which is fine. And so I just really started to say, okay, I've got to kind of drink from a different well now, because I'm actually having to lead this team, and I'm the one that was going to be responsible to build it, and we don't even know what it looks like yet. There's a lot of unknown in front of us, like a lot of unknown. And so I started to kind of dig into, there's a guy named Craig Groeschel, probably heard of him, Life Church, and I found his leadership material helpful, and and what's nice is it's free.
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
and so I've been listening to a bunch of his podcasts and kind of drinking from that well. And he's got some exercises that you can go through to start to think about some things and process. So I mean, there's probably a bunch of other stuff, but that's probably one of the bigger ones that I've been drinking from. From the secular part of the world, I'm trying to figure out the world I live in and how to understand it better. And my daughter, because of her psychology classes and stuff in Canada, you probably know this name, but Jordan Peterson. And I don't know that I agree with his theology, but he's helped me to understand better what the world we're living in, how they think, engage, and even the combativeness that he's had to manage, trying to figure out how to even exist in Canada, even though he's much further to the left than we are, he's still being pummeled.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you put your head up when we're as far to the right as it were, politically or whatever you want to call it. So I listen to or follow on X and other things, a lot of the things that's going on in his world, just to kind of understand both the interaction of the culture that we're going to manage and also even some maybe get some street smarts about how to engage and process. So and to think about the philosophical world we're in too. So I think those are the kind of, I mean, there's lots of more wells, but those are probably the two biggest wells that I'm drinking a lot more from than I maybe had been recently. So,
Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Phil, I know you've been involved in a lot of different ministry capacities, church planting, pastoral care, missionary. What are a couple maybe growing pains or life lessons you learned in ministry along the way?
Yeah, boy, do you have another several books that you want to write, or just
We're getting Cat the Dog and the Ferret. I mean, that's already taken. So,
if the personality, a perfect personality is ready, aim, fire, probably coming from my 17-year-old self to hear my initial stages of growth would have been fire, ready, aim. I think I'm more into, I've arrived closer to aim, fire. The ready part, I'm still kind of working on. And so I would say that one of the biggest failures, or it's like, your strength is always your weakness. I think that's, all of us know that. No, that's not a surprise to anybody. My strength is faith. I have a strong faith. And maybe it's just pure blind ignorance and blissful, inability to see the truth of something. But I'll walk into, why did I move thousands of miles away from my family? And why did I go to a place I didn't know anybody to start a church with just our family? Why would I do that? Well, it wasn't really related to me. It was related to believing God wanted me to do it. And what was in front of me was irrelevant. That wasn't the question. It's if God wants it, then God will do it. So that's a wonderful quality, but that also produces sometimes the difference between faith and presumption, right? And I would say where I've misstepped many, many times and have caused pain for others, which is most painful for me. I'm not okay with creating pain for myself, but I'm much more able to accept that than I am when I know that my choices affect other people. That's when it's just really painful for me, and I just have a hard time emotionally, trying to get right with that, even though I know God's forgiven me. It's like, what in the world? And it's usually not because I've done something directly sinful. It's just presumption. So moving too quickly on something without really seeking God and others, because I assume that we're supposed to do X, Y, or Z. And I probably can give 1,000 illustrations of that, but I think that's probably the biggest, if I look back at the history of my life. And so as I take on this new role, I'm really been begging the Lord to give me teammates that have the courage to speak into my life. I think the hard part of being someone who has, I think, pretty good character and is very honest and forthright. The downside of that is people give you a lot of trust, which is good. The weakness of that is when you're working with someone, they're giving you trust, and you actually need them not only to trust you, but also to push on you a little bit and say, hey, is that what you really think is a good idea, without feeling like somehow the relationship is in question. That's one of the privileges I've had with being working with my twin brother my whole life, because we have enough trust in the relationship that we're not trying to harm the other person by asking a hard question. It has nothing to do with us. It has to do with, are we obeying Jesus, and are we trying to do the right thing? Not, can I one-up you, or, oh, well, I found something, I'm going to criticize you. I don't even understand that mindset, but I find in my relationships, because of my strength of leadership and other things, getting partners that are able to not feel insecure in a way to just push back and genuinely say, hey, Phil, I love you, but have you really thought about these three things? So that's probably where I'm hoping that I can round myself out better, not because I can perfectly become the perfect human. That's not going to happen. But can I build the right team around me so that I have the right people asking those other questions that maybe the faith-oriented person doesn't ask, So I think that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Phil, with that in perspective, you are a church planter.
Yep.
And I've planted 3 churches myself, and it does take a level of faith and maybe crazy.
Yes,
faith,
crazy.
right?
Yeah, crazy faith. Yeah.
When it comes to church planting and growth, what are some of the changes or shifts maybe you're seeing right now when it comes to church planting and church growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 dynamics at play that I am actually still very inquisical about. Probably 25 years ago, if you could produce something at a fairly high level in terms of the quality of what they come to see, the quality of your speaking, the quality of your music, the quality of the environment, then that attractional model could be very effective at reaching, because there was enough of the culture had some kind of church, even if it was just some kind of a church DNA in them, that was attractional to them, and they have spiritual questions that come. It's safe. I'm actually at question right now. I think some of the big churches can still get away with that because they have enough already existing synergy, but to initiate from nothing, I think that we're going to have to really figure out how to not get caught up in what the secular world and even sadly a lot of our Christians have on the world of social justice and how that justice is played out. But we've got to figure out how to live in godly mercy and what that really lives and looks like. And I think what's more attractional for people today is the church actually doing the things that they think the church is supposed to be doing? And oddly enough, most people intuitively know the church is supposed to be doing the things that are good for the culture around them. And I think that's where the light, Bible, Jesus says, if they will see your good works. And then he says something that us as fundamentalists don't like. He says, and they will glorify your Father which is in heaven. Well, either Jesus is lying, or he's being exaggerative, or he's making a statement. And I believe he's making a statement. So it doesn't mean that the only form of evangelism is doing good works. I'm not even suggesting that in the least, but I am suggesting if we're going to penetrate a culture, we have to figure out how to gain respect. And right now, the secular world has found a way to demonize anything that's Christian, especially when you hold to things like men are men and females are females. How are you going to combat that? You're not going to combat that with wonderful arguments. That's not the way you combat it. You're going to have to combat that with ways of demonstrating as a church that you are in the community, that you demonstrate God's love, and that you demonstrate mercy. And when they look at that, it's kind of like what Paul says later on, and then they can't. Their testimony against you falls flat because the people around you. And so I think the more we can find ways to not just to manipulate mercy so that we can to genuinely love the people who are around us, but I think that's going to be really powerful. I do think we still have to, the hard part of being in a media-driven world is we still have to do things with excellence. And so I think one of the weaknesses that I had when I started, one of the churches that we started in Vancouver, was I was so frustrated with the circus wheel of having to keep the excellence factor up. I wanted to make sure we had godly teaching and discipleship making. I focused on that so much that I didn't put as much energy into this basket. And I actually lost on the initial stages of our starting point, which if you're in church planting, you need to know you only have one launch. And you know that, Trent. You only have one launch. And you can make up ground by doing it better later, but you only have one launch.
One launch.
And so you better make sure that you have your best game when you're ready to launch, because that's going to when you have the most opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
And I missed on a couple of those types of things where I didn't, in my goal to be more discipleship and biblical centered, which sounds all wonderful and I think it's the right move, I was almost despising or being frustrated by some of the other truisms as well, that we do live in a culture that respects things, and if we don't respect the same things, they're not going to participate with us.
Yeah. We were going to ask you the question about a mistake that you've made, but you've sort of just described missing that opportunity with launch. Mm-hmm. And as you were describing it, it made me think there are different gift sets, right? And if I think about a church planner, I think there's a particular gift set there. And then you talked about, and there's overlap, obviously, but then you talked about the teaching and the disciple making. And I'm like, that sounds very pastoral.
Right.
I think of a church planner sometimes more as entrepreneurial or apostolic,
Right.
sometimes prophetic. And so I'm curious if you could just like give us, what are some differences that you do see sometimes between someone who's more pastorally wired versus someone who's wired as a church planter who's going to shepherd that way, if that makes sense?
Well, I would say that though I'm incredibly, I'm an all-in kind of person, I'm an all-or-nothing kind of person, which is a weakness and a strength. And so in some ways I can be incredibly loving and caring for people, but I'm not a shepherd. That's not my gift. And so, for instance, if I'm going to do a hospital visit, I will do a hospital visit. I will go visit my people. But I'll probably stay for maybe 10 minutes because I know if I stay longer, because my primary gift is both either evangelism or exhortation, the poor person in the hospital is going to have me teach them something about something, and they don't need that. They just need to be loved. But I believe in the power of presence, personal presence. And that's kind of like, I have these little philisms, and one of them is there's nothing greater than the power of personal presence. So you can call and email and text, and those are all wonderful. But when you show up, it's not what you say. It's that your very presence has made this impact. So I think the interesting thing is I'm trying to figure out how to answer your question. Well, I guess let me go answer both the previous question and this one at the same time, because when we started the church in Vancouver, really I didn't understand how the interplay of gifts. Now I could answer on a piece of paper, but I didn't functionally understand how important they were. Let me give you a different look at that. Every place I had been up until that point, everything I touched grew. Not because I'm a great person, but my gift helped to affect what was going on. So when I was at the Waldorf Church, for instance, their youth pastor transitioned to full-time young life. The youth group was down to 10, or 3 or 5, I forget, was it 8 or 10, whatever it was, something, it was a small number of kids. By the end of the year and a half that we were, the 18 months we were there, we had recruited 40 adults to be in the youth staff. We had about 90 in the junior high and 110 in the senior high kids, and we had youth choirs and puppet teams. And well, could I take credit for any of that? No, that all the gifting was present in the church. The church was growing; it's dynamic. My gift was catalyzing, and that was a gift that I had. But massive growth took place, and many kids come to Christ, and a lot of cool things happen, and leaders got developed. But I don't take credit for that and say, well, look what I did. I don't think that. I never even thought that what was happening. It was just kind of God was doing stuff and I was there. But what it does do intuitively is it makes you think, well, of course, whatever I touch is going to grow, because every place I touch something, it grows. So when I go to plant this church, it's going to grow. Well, I'm missing several key ingredients, like the shepherding gift. So when we started the first church, we kind of knew we needed a shepherd to help us. We half-heartedly, actually, Adam Copenhaver, we brought him up, but we didn't have enough money to pay him full-time, which we needed to do. And had we done that, we probably would have really done really well, because Adam's a very gifted shepherd and teacher primary, but he's definitely a shepherd. And we would have had a super high-caliber person on our team, but we couldn't afford to keep him there, and he had to go back to, which, Mapton, I'm sure, is happy that he's there, but we lost it. But my point is, we knew it, but we didn't know it. We didn't own it enough to say, no, actually, at all cost, we're going to do this. We did it at kind of a half-hearted cost. And so we paid a big price for not having that shepherd gift with us. And after 4 years into our church plant, we had gone to 150 people. And then that fourth year, we started to drop all of our people, started to leave, and we went down to 70 people because that shepherding gift wasn't present, and not only in the service, but also in the decision making and the just how you think about things and having that input. We missed it. So I don't know if that answers both your questions, but I feel like that.
Yeah, I can see the distinction between these, and the theme that's come up in a couple of things that you've said is the importance of teamwork. I mean, ministry is not a solo gig.
Yeah,
and no matter your context, you could be in a secular context, you could be in a traditional context like we are here in the Midwest. You could be doing a church plant, you could be doing a new campus, or you could be in a church that's been long-lasting. But if you don't have a team that fleshes itself out in leadership, our strengths become our weaknesses, and we can't complement one another. So it's important to have, whether you're developing that team or you can hire that team,
right.
Team's important.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like a piece of bread, if you can have a cracker, or you can have a loaf of bread. What's the difference? Yeast. But who wants to eat yeast by itself? I don't. And so I think that's where, knowing that we have neither one of us are as important as the other, but actually we impact each other, and we need to appreciate that. And so I think that's a big part of going forward is having a deeper appreciation of other gifts. And one of the things that when we worked with Assist, when we started to do, we going into churches that were in challenge situations, usually some kind of dysfunction. You know, when churches get smaller, it's not just because of bad music and poor preaching, though those aren't helpful. There's usually something underneath it, right? And you have to kind of untie and pull it out. And one of the churches we were working with, neat leader, godly, and had a historic leader that was still in the church who had very, very different gifts, a high shepherd, high mercy person. And then the new leader was strong and very, had a lot of leadership capacity. And helping this new leader appreciate the shepherd in the room, because he doesn't operate the way he does. And he would, originally think, well, he obviously doesn't care about X, Y, and Z because he didn't do this and that. Well, actually, no, he's just wired differently than you do. And it was beautiful to watch them arrive at, oh, I need him. Yeah. And when he got that, all of a sudden, things changed. Their relationship is great now, and they're doing well together. And he's finally utilizing this shepherd who's got great gifting to be a part of the body. So it's been cool to see.
Yeah.
Phil, what would you say to a listener today who's contemplating, they maybe in their heart they're wrestling with planting a church? I really feel God's leading me this direction. How would you encourage one of our listeners today if they are thinking about planting a church?
Well, the first thing I would say is that our confidence has to come from God. One of my key verses, and I used to have life verses, but I've got too many of them to say this is my life verse. I've got like 40 of those. So one of them is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 24. It says, "Faithful is who called you, who will also do it." And so I think you have to make your calling. Peter says, Paul says, make your calling and election sure. I don't think he's only referring to salvation there. I think he's talking about the task that God's given you to do. And so I think that's a big piece. And I think they need to kind of get into, like, one of the things that we do, if you were to come to Assist and ask us, hey, I don't want to be a church planter, the first thing we'd do is we'd give you an assessment, Ridley or other assessments. And it's not so that we can, clarify that you're perfect or not perfect. In fact, we're going to discover that you're not perfect. But it does help give us some tools to see where you're strong and weak, and also to give you something to say, hey, you're going to be weak in these two areas, not because we have a negative view of you, but because we can accurately assess some things, and you just need to know that. So if you're going to fly this plane, you're missing a wing. So build the other wing, or make sure that you have a team to help you put that wing together, and value that. So I think so. I would say, know yourself, discover what your gifts are and aren't, and clarify your call, and get with people who can push on you, not in a negative, their one-upmanship attitude, but in a healthy, godly place where people aren't going to just, oh, that's so neat, you're going to be a church planter, here's $100 and go do the thing. No, actually, hey, let me give you a really good example. For instance, when I first met my wife, this is odd, people are going to be like, oh my word, we were dating. Well, we hadn't started dating yet. Well, maybe we did. I'm trying to remember exactly. We were starting to date when we was at Bible college together, and she was going to be a missionary. She had just signed up to do the New Tribes Papua New Guinea interface program, and she was going to be on the field doing very much remote ministry. And I looked at her and I said to her, I said, Beth, let me ask you a question. You want to go and make disciples of people in another culture, in another language, and lead them to Christ and help them to become followers of Him. Who have you led to Christ here, and who are you discipling now? And she looked at me and she says, that is a great question. And that's the kind of character I had. Instead of slapping me in the face, she was like, wow, and so she then immediately pursued that activity in her life right away in the church and context that she was a part of. She was helping with an African church and whatever. So my point is I think if you're not doing it now, you're not going to do it later. Mm-hmm. And if you find weaknesses in either your evangelism or your discipleship process, don't wait for some magical cure to come happen or some opportunity.
Totally.
You have people in front of you that who need Jesus, need to be discipled. Why aren't you doing it? And if you're having a hard time, reach out and ask for help. I think we have all of these invisible walls that keep us from, and these excuses we have in our head. We're never going to do it perfectly, but Jesus calls us to do it anyways. And so my call would be get your calling figured out, assess yourself, know yourself so you can do it, and then get busy doing the things that are going to be required to make disciples. Are you leading people to Christ? Are you disciple them? Are you helping them grow in their faith? Are you engaging them in ministry? Are you involved in ministry? Don't wait. Do.
The nice thing about working with an organization like Assist is that you have assessment tools. You have a coach that would work with someone who's going to do church planning or go through revitalization. You also do boot camps so people can get training. There's short-term trips over the course of the summer so people can actually cut their teeth on some of these activities that you're talking about. I also know that your role with Assist has shifted a little bit. If you want to kind of give us a snapshot of what's your heart for Canada in the years to come.
Well, and we got just a few minutes here, guys. So I'll try to be brief, but I think let me frame it in kind of extreme terms for a second. Canada is a place that is rapidly moving away from God. Quickly, in Canada, when we moved there in 97, 23% of the people in Canada would have called themselves non-religious. Today, that number is 54% of Canadians would not recognize themselves as a religious background. In Canada, when we moved to Canada, 15% of the people would have considered themselves evangelical Christian. Today, less than 7% would consider themselves evangelical Christian, less than 3% are practicing. So less than 3% of people are actually following Christ, and obviously we can't totally quantify that, but basically. And so the need for the gospel is incredible. When we moved to Canada in 97, God was kind and allowed us to plant 5-6 churches, and the 7th church on its way. Now, through different activities, but mostly I believe that the demonic work of Satan has done a great job of destroying the churches that we had established, and we're down to 2 churches. And there is some division still present. So you're asking, what's my passion? Well, we were focused on this assist work, helping to do the work that we're doing now. We were seeing some of the interplay at Canada, but we weren't as focused on it. But I just begged my brother this whole last year, we've got to go back and do something in Canada. And finally he says, Phil, I can't. Assist is really large and we're doing lots of activity. I don't have enough space. You go back and restart the work in Canada. And so my heart is to, Father, how can we have fruit, but fruit that remains? And so one of the things that we realized that we did in 2013, it's insignificant in most people's mind, but in 2013 we transitioned the mission, which was at the time called Grace Brethren Canada, and we gave authority over to the churches, which were only 5 at the time. And we said, you guys can lead. Well, they asked, we want to lead ourselves. Okay, well, we weren't really even imposing anything on them, but they wanted to lead themselves. And so we established Grace Fellowship Canada at that time. The churches then had their own autonomy, and the mission was no longer leading how we're going to move forward. That seemed to work a little bit, but that was really, it's like giving the 10-year-old your keys to your car. It was the wrong decision. And I just got done talking to a denomination leader, evangelical free guy who's really awesome. And we were chatting in Canada. He says, in Canada, we waited 50 years before we became our own denomination in Canada. And we had over 35 churches, so we were really self-supporting and self-sufficient. And so my heart is that we would go back and we would not be so willingly giving over authority, not that we're trying to hold on to some kind of weird power, but we need to figure out how to build and sustain something that's going to last, not just a minute, but for eternity, and build a foundation for churches for a long time. And my thought is, James Gribble, he didn't see a lot in his lifetime. And so in my lifetime, it may not be that I'll see another 30 churches get planted and Canada get established. Maybe I won't see that in my lifetime. Maybe I'll pass away. But my prayer is that whatever seed we start again will actually be lasting. And like Africa, where there's thousands of churches and hundreds of thousands of believers, that would be wonderful if God would give us even a part of that for Canada. That would be great.
Yeah, great. We do, for our last couple of questions, just talk about your walk with Jesus. We just have a couple minutes left, so you've sort of touched on your theme for 2024 with moving your focus back and God planting a seed here. But I would be curious about just your personal walk with Jesus. What are some core ways that you relate to Jesus, that you stay fresh with Jesus, that he grows you as a follower?
Well, I mean, this might be almost juvenile or simple, but one of my favorite things is my kids are starting to, do their Bible study themselves and pray together and whatever. And they were like, we don't really seem like we can't be faithful to it, Dad. And I said, well, why don't we just have a small form of accountability? At breakfast, we'll share what God has been teaching us, right? And so that's been such a simple little thing. But, having my two boys at breakfast together, sharing what God is teaching them as they're reading through the Bible it's been a joy and a lot of fun. And not that they're perfect at it, and we're not perfect Christians, but it's been a lot of fun, and there's been a lot of insight that comes out of that is feeding me in a way that, And then I think the other thing is I've kind of always walked through the Bible a little bit here and there and stayed in one book here and there. And I've always had a hard time reading all the way through the Bible. I'm a let's get something done kind of person. So Leviticus would kill me. And people like Tim, could I have more nuance? I want to really understand that. Okay, I know how to build a tabernacle now. But I said this year I'm gonna read through the Bible again, and it's been so much fun. That personal discipline of actually just every day reading 2 or 3 chapters and just kind of soaking it in, and because when you're in a ministry as long as we have and read through the Bible, I don't know how many times I've read through the Bible. Taking it a little faster is actually okay. Before I was like, I need a little more time to chew on that, so I'd only do half a chapter now. So, but this kind of been fun to kind of drive by in a faster car, as it were, and see the landscape. And it's been, so those are the 2 spiritual disciplines there's lots more, but those are the 2 big ones that are feeding me right now.
I love the idea of sharing those conversations with your kids over breakfast. And we one of the landmarks of our fellowship or cornerstones is biblical truth. Right? So we want that to be part of the core diet that we have as leaders.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Last question for you, Phil. What's something you need to hear from Jesus in this season of your life?
Ooh, what do I need to hear from Jesus? Wow, that's a big question. Well, I feel like he has been affirming the call back to Canada. I don't want to be too dramatic, but I don't know how to paint the most ridiculous picture for you of going back into a ministry that hasn't had a level of success, and then now it's where it is, and then there's still some level of disunity that's present that we need to figure out how to solve. How do you go back into that? Yeah. So I guess I just need to make sure I'm hearing his voice. I don't want to presume anything, but I also don't want to lack courage to take steps that God's asking me to take. And so I'm really begging God for a lot of clarity, because we're not walking into a new situation where we kind of prestingly, we're trying to clean up something, and also we're trying to restart something. And I think for our fellowship, that means, well, aren't you guys already in Canada? That's an old hat. We're past that now. So how do we find prayer partners and support and even new leaders to come and join us? All of that seems impossible, really, from a human standpoint.
Fortunately, you have the gift of faith. You told us that. Right?
So I'm stupid enough, I guess, or willing to say, God, if you want me to go, I'll go. But that doesn't mean I have the answers to those questions. And so I really need to hear, I guess, his voice. I want to make sure that I'm doing what he wants me to do.
Yeah. If I can leave you with something that comes to mind as you're saying that, the end of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus appears to the women and says, tell the disciples I'm going ahead of them to Galilee. And Galilee's their hometown. It's not necessarily where they finish, but they're like, wait, I'm going back to Galilee? And when they get there, Jesus is there. And I wonder if that's maybe just a picture of what is going to happen in Canada. Jesus has gone ahead of you, and you're going back home.
I'm prayerful about that. This morning I was reading about Samuel anointing Saul as king, and the number of things that God had aligned to happen, both in Saul finding Samuel and then Samuel getting him to become king. There were literally, I didn't count them all, but there's probably 15 different miraculous happenstances or things that had to happen in a certain time frame. And as you said that, I was aligning my heart with what you said. God, you are already the one that's trying to restart Canada, not me. Yeah. You're just calling me as one of the people to be part of it. Let me trust you for what you're going to prepare ahead of time that you're already doing. And so, Michael, did I miss the sign? I don't want to miss the road sign. I don't want to miss the. So yeah. So I thank you for that, Tim, and believe in God for that too.
Yeah.
Phil, how can our listeners today get a hold of you?
Well, probably my email address is philipbryant@outlook.com. On our website, assistcx.org, if you /Canada on that, then you would get a page where you'll see a bunch of stuff that's happening and also a video that shares some of the background of why we're doing what we're doing, and also a place to sign up for our newsletter. My biggest task this year is, God, would you give us 2,000 prayer partners? Yeah, we need leaders, we need a plan, and we need money, we need all those things. But what we really need is to know that we're hearing God's voice and God is going before us, and we need the prayers of His people behind us. And so I'm asking, if anyone's listening, I'm asking, would you consider being a prayer partner? That would be the biggest piece for me right now. The rest of it, God is going to do, but I believe that we just need more spiritual engagement here.
Amen.
Yep.
Well, I encourage our listeners, please sign up, be a prayer partner, and let's pray for Phil as he's going to invade Canada again. Phil, thank you for being on the program today.
Yeah, thanks.
What a privilege. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
This is Dr. Trent Lambert from the Center for Thriving Leaders at Grace Theological Seminary with Pastor and Dr. Tim Sprankle from Leesburg Grace Church. Thanks for listening to our conversation with Phil Bryant.
The More of Us podcast recognizes that we are not alone. We lead best when we walk with others. Join us for more of these talks by subscribing today. God bless, and may Jesus go before you.